Hi, Larry Jackson here with Ketchikan, Alaska News. Today I'm visiting with Phil Doherty at the Southeast Alaska Regional Dive Association. We're going to talk coronavirus and PSP testing and the economic impacts here in the city of Ketchikan. I'll prompt that. So, Phil, can you describe for everyone the nature of PSP, paralytic shellfish poisoning, and how it relates to the state budget?
Well, let me just give a real quick course on PSP. Bivalves, which are the geoduck clams, I was talking about geoduck clams, the way they eat, they filter water. In that water, there's phytoplankton, and the byproduct of some of the phytoplankton is paralytic shellfish poison. It's toxic. It sits in their gut ball. It's only in their gut ball. There's no PSP in the meat. But because we sell it on the live market as a whole clam, it has to pass PSP testing. So we spend to get our samplers, our boats out there on the grounds to sample every week, because it's only, once you pass PSP, it's only good for 4 days, and you can go right back and do it again. We spend somewhere around $150,000 to $180,000 a year just to go out and collect the samples and then ship them up to the lab in Anchorage. The lab in Anchorage is the only certified lab in Alaska that can
State
pass,
certified?
State and federal certified.
Mm-hmm.
Federal certified because a lot of these are federal regulations.
Mm-hmm.
The state has to comply with the federal regulations. So you've got to go back to the shellfish industry nationwide, and we're all under kind of the same roof and same rules and regulations when it comes to paralytic shellfish poisoning and water quality. So anyway, so we get our samples, we send them up to Anchorage. We spend all the money to get our samplers out in the grounds, to collect our samples, get them up to the lab. And ever since the geoduck fishery has been in existence, and other bivalve fisheries have been in existence, the state has paid at the lab. They've paid for the actual testing of for PSP. You know, the lab, we have not paid for the lab costs because it's a public health issue, and states are usually carry the budget on public health issues. There's not another state in the union that has the industry paying for water quality and PSP testing. We're the only state that does put a lot of the burden on the industry. So the governor's budget as it stands today would impose upon not only the commercial geoduck fishery, but anyone who has an oyster farm for mariculture, would impose upon them fees at the Anchorage lab above and beyond the collecting and the shipping of the samples. And with the collecting and shipping of the samples, along with the water quality testing that we do, it pretty much taps us the geoduck budget out every year. We don't have a lot of money in the bank. That money comes in again through the assessment tax, so the fishermen are directly paying for these services to get the geoducks up there. If the governor's budget stands as it is today, and he imposes a $400 to $700 fee per test at the lab, it very well could put the commercial geoduck fishery out of business, because we would not have the money to pay for it. And there's no other source of income for SARDFA except for our assessment taxes.
How many tests are typically done in a given winter season?
In the last, let's say 5 years, just go back the last few years, we usually send up 145 samples for the course of a season. So if they were to charge us $400 more per sample at the lab, then you're looking at $60,000 to $70,000 added to our budget, which we don't have. If it goes to the high end, which they've been talking about of $700, you know, then you're talking over an extra $100,000 that we would have to pay back to the state to pay for the lab costs. And the same thing would happen to the oyster farmers. They would have to pick up the cost of the PSP testing at the lab. And, you know, we've talked to a handful of them, and I'll tell you that they're not making a tremendous amount of money at this point in time. And any added fees through the state of Alaska could potentially put them out of business.
Reiterate that compounding economic impact from your diver. You said that for every diver, that for every X vessel dollar, it affects the community in an exponential way.
Sure, you know, you can expand them out, and the McDowell Group has done studies on this, and they can expand out seafood money paid to the fishermen. be it a diver or a salmon fisherman, it ripples its way through the community 4 or 5 times that. So for every dollar you pay a fisherman at the dock, that's $4 or $5 spent in the community.
So a $2.5 million, say, ex-vessel value on geoducks may have a larger impact to Ketchikan Craig of over $10 million.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
You know, without a doubt. And again, you know, since the dive fisheries are really the only late fall, wintertime fisheries, you take, you know, in the sea cucumber fishery, there's 200 guys out on the ground fishing. In the geoduck fishery, there's 60 boats out on the ground. You take those boats out of the community, and as we talked about, you know, they don't go to the fuel dock, they don't go to the grocery stores, they don't buy this, that, and the other thing from the hardware store to keep their boats up to speed. They're not paying their crew members, and the plants that are the land-based plants that are processing those species are closed for the wintertime, and they don't pay their people.
And your message to the governor and the delegation?
Our message to the governor is simple: do not charge PSP fees at the lab. We pay for the sampling. As I said, you know, that costs us anywhere between $150,000 to $170,000, $180,000 a year. It's a very expensive program. We understand that, and we fully will pay that, and we accept that as part of the burden of managing these fisheries. But it puts an extra burden on us. It's a health issue, it's a public safety issue. As I said, there's not another state in the union that charges the industry, be it mariculture or commercial shellfish industry, those charges, and Alaska's the only one that does. And any added fees at the lab through this governor's budget could and will put us out of business.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
You bet.
I'm here with Jeremy Layton on his boat, the Reliance, in Bar Harbor, and we wanted to talk to Jeremy a little bit about this proposed budget cut to the DEC, which would affect the geoduck sampling program and cost. Can you talk a little about what you know, Jeremy? And Jeremy sits on the board of SARDFA, so he can talk from that angle too.
So the state's got a proposal right now that they're going to impose a user fee on anybody that sends a sample to the DEC to get tested for PSP or any of that sort of thing. At the current time, there's no cost. Years ago, SARDFA lobbied the state legislator to get $100,000 put into the DEC budget so that we'd no longer have to pay the $125 back then. This was 15 years ago. So for the last 15 years, 12 years, whatever it's been, we haven't had to pay anything. Now that the new budget, they're cutting DEC's budget down. The DEC is now proposing a user fee for every sample sent to be $400 to $700. And what that means to SARDFA, on a normal week, we send in about 6 samples. We pay for those 6 samples to get a diver to go out and take them already for about $4,000. So that would be an increase to us of about 50% more money. SARDFA taxes themselves for every pound they get. Basically, every dollar that comes in, 7% goes back to SARDFA that a diver makes. On top of that, we also pay the 3% fish tax to the state. So we're paying, before we even get our check, before we can put it in our bank account, we pay 10% just to cover our costs. The last few years, SARDFA has actually been going at a negative by paying for PSP sampling. Most of that cost is to pay the samplers to go out and take the sample out of the ground from their boat. If we add this even at $400 to our budget, we'll be broke in no time. I mean, we're potentially going to not have money at the end of this season for next season. We're going to have to come up with a way to figure it out. If they add this, it's just going to devastate the fishery. I mean, we're going to be on the verge of closing it down. If they increase this, not only to us geoduck divers, but any of the oyster farmers are going to be devastated. It's a huge cost.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate hearing that. Following up with Jeremy's conversation, I called Meta Mesdag of Alaska Shellfish Growers Association and asked her what their stand is on this governor's budget. They are opposed, of course, to this taking away of the funding of the PSP testing program and basically putting it on the shoulders of the industry. The total that the governor is withdrawing from the budget is $457,700, and that would be spread across both the geoduck farmers and the shellfish oyster growers of the state, driving up their costs substantially. And she reiterated this would probably drive many, if not all, of the growers out of business. That business alone, just the oysters, does about 1.6 million in revenues in the state. And that's from 4 or 5 big farms and many small farms. We got a lot of farms coming online, she said, so this would be a way to shoot the industry in the foot before it ever got off the ground. So that's my report. Thanks for watching.